in Congress. Let's talk about that and more with the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us. How real are the chances that President Biden breaks off at least part of this massive plan and tries to pass a more narrow, what's called traditional infrastructure bill first?
Well, we believe these things fit together, and that's why the president rolled them out the way he did. But we also believe in having this conversation across the aisle and in both chambers to see where there might be support for something bipartisan. That's a process that's ongoing. We welcome the Republicans coming to the table with specific ideas, and that's exactly what we're looking forward to getting into in the days ahead.
Yeah, infrastructure is so important. Everyone agrees on that. But you say inaction is not an option. Inaction is not an option. So if you could gain some traction with a bipartisan compromise, what would you want to see in a smaller bill? Because as you know, there's agreement on traditional, what's called traditional infrastructure. But what about other areas, broadband, water, manufacturing, schools, for example?
Well, we think that broadband is absolutely infrastructure in the 21st century. I mean, having a connection to the internet now matters as much as having that connection to the interstate highway system. Same thing with water. I mean, it's as simple as the fact that you need water to live. I mean, the word infrastructure, infra means beneath, and what's beneath our cities are water pipes that in too many cases have lead in them. So we believe these things are tightly connected with infrastructure. We see a lot of agreement around that. Now, we also see a lot of major bipartisan support among the American people for what we're seeking to do to improve our schools, to make sure that elder care is not a barrier for Americans wanting to be able to get through life and enter the workforce, to make sure that we're supporting families. To us, these things fit together. You know, we don't want to get too sucked into academic arguments over what label to put on what provisions. We want the focus to be on what's good public policy and how much consensus can we get around the good policies that are ahead.
The Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says, in his words, there's zero Republican support for President Biden's proposal, which McConnell calls a $4 trillion grab bag. But right now, you don't necessarily even have 50 Democratic votes in the Senate either, do you?
Well, that's exactly the process we're going through right now, seeing where the interest lies, where the consensus lies. And by the way, you know, we got folks in our party saying it should be even bigger, in addition to those who are asking questions about the size and scope of it. But that's a very natural part of the process, and the president has, as you've seen, hosted members of both parties in both chambers in the Oval Office. I've been on the phone literally every day with Republican and Democratic members to have these conversations. We're going to plunge into them, but we can't do this forever. The president has said that the one thing that he will absolutely not stand for is sitting on our hands, not acting, because the American people are rightly impatient for us to actually do something. So I expect the days and weeks ahead to be very, very active with debate, discussion, negotiation, and ultimately coming up with a way to move forward. Yeah,
we'll see. One issue, and I've been doing some research on this, as the economy here in the United States continues to improve, the annualized GDP more than 6% in the first quarter. Wall Street doing great right now, record highs on the Dow Jones, the S&P 500. Are you at all concerned, Mr. Secretary, that there won't necessarily be the appetite for trillions in new spending?
We're never going to be concerned about great economic news like what we're seeing. But what I want to emphasize is the American Jobs Plan isn't just about growth in this quarter or the next year. It is about setting up America to win the future. We're talking about infrastructure investments that we will be living with for the rest of my lifetime. And by the same token, my generation and the generation to come will be living with the consequences if we fail to invest, if we fail to tackle the climate challenge, if we fail to compete with our allies and our strategic competitors like China, who are not hesitating to make big infrastructure investments at such a defining moment as the early 2020s are proving to be.
Yeah, let's not forget these proposals put forward by the president are 10-year proposals, and that's really important. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thanks as usual for joining us. You're always welcome to come back to the Situation Room.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Coming up, a funeral for Andrew